1 year on after the devastating Mumbai attacks, has India improved homeland security? And how have strategic alliances in the region changed following the deadly strikes? This is Inside Story. Hello there, welcome to the programme. I'm Nick Clark. Security is our first talking point. That was the main element absent a year ago when the Indian city of Mumbai endured 4 days of terror at the hands of 10 gunmen. 166 people were killed and a nation was shocked to the core. Here's SHIVRAJ.
The Mumbai attacks lasted 4 days. Terror on the streets of the state capital of Maharashtra. Officially, 166 killed, amongst them 18 police officers. The guardians of Maharashtra's state capital have complained of being poorly equipped for decades. In fact, security across the whole country has become a burning issue and the subject of heated debate in Parliament and on the streets.
What will you do?
During last year's assault, government officials like Sanjay Nirupam, being interviewed here by Al Jazeera, were mobbed by the public, demanding answers to their questions of why the security had failed. Anger spilled onto the streets, with daily demonstrations demanding to know where was the protection. According to the former Interior Minister, who was forced to resign over the issue, no amount of planning or investment could have prevented such attacks.
Intelligence was available, it was given to them. What was not available was the time, the date and the place.
Little comfort to SMITA, whose husband, Vijay SALASKAR, was one of the most senior and highly decorated officers in Mumbai's police force. He was also one of the first to be killed by the gunman close to the Karma hospital. She still wants more answers from the government.
Police force is not equipped, not trained for such type of attack. Still the Mumbai police are so brave that they handled the situation very properly. And then later on NSG commandos were called and they handled the situation. So I'm really proud of my husband and the Mumbai Police Department. But as a wife of the police officer and a victim's wife, she must know what has happened exactly and how her husband has lost life for the country.
Serving alongside Vijay SALASKAR that fateful night was Constable Arun Jadhav. Still recovering from his injuries after being hit by 5 bullets in his arms and shoulders, his recollection of the sequence of events so very clear.
Our car was sprayed with bullets. My senior officers died on the spot, so did the constable next to me. I got hit in my arm. I played dead. The 2 terrorists, one of them Kasab, threw the 2 officers in their front seats out and began driving. I felt helpless. I wanted to kill them, but couldn't lift my gun. I thought it was all over.
In the wake of the Mumbai attack, central and state governments each promised they would increase their efforts to bolster and invest in the country's security apparatus. I challenged the senior police officer in charge of the city's security to explain what improvements have been made.
We have learned great lessons from whatever happened last year. After that, we have made certain changes in our standing operating procedures. We have changed in our weaponry, we have changed in our training modules, and I can assure you that at this point of time we are much better prepared than we were last year.
But words are not enough for a public demanding action.
Mumbai police should be more equipped with better arms and ammunition so that they can face such kind of terror attacks.
I think there are still steps that the government can take to completely make us secure, because things have changed, like people have woken up from the 26/11 attacks, but there are still steps, there's a lot to be done.
It seems that for many, the real investment in security means visible signs of such protection. Having undercover officers is all very well, but the public wants to see uniformed police on the streets with machine guns and bullet-resistant vests. Sahil Rahman in Mumbai for Inside Story.
Well, to take this on, joining us now are our guests in Washington, D.C., Gary Birch. He's a professor at the University of Georgia's Center for International Trade and Security. In New Delhi, K.C. Singh, he's a former Indian diplomat. And here in Doha, we have Farhan Mujahid Chak. He's Assistant Professor of International Affairs at Qatar University. Gentlemen, welcome all. I'd like to start with K.C. Singh, if I may. So the fact is there has been no major incident in the year since Mumbai happened. Some say that comes down to not so much improved security in India as Pakistan's attention being elsewhere. What do you think?
I would tend to agree with you. There are certain steps that government have taken, but those steps are, in a sense, preparing for the last attack, not for the next attack. And government have again been taken by surprise when they discovered these two gentlemen, Headley and Rana, apprehended in Chicago, whose movements the government was completely unaware of, both before 26/11 and some time even afterwards. They are just trying to cover their tracks. They're trying to figure out whom they met. Were they preparing for this attack, or were they preparing for another attack? Therefore, in a sense, we are somewhat better prepared, but we are not really insulated from the next attack.
Okay, Professor Chak, it's fair to say that India's security hinges on what's happening in Pakistan, doesn't it?
Of course, there's a general relationship that needs to be acknowledged there, but I think that Mr. Singh's comments are just inaccurate, to say the best of it. In essence, India is always failing to acknowledge its own complicity in the instability that is ravaging its own nation and the surrounding nations, for that matter. It needs to take a good hard look at itself. It needs to take a look at the own grievances, the deep grievances within its own society, and address those concerns. If it does not address those concerns, nothing will change. You will have a series of Mumbai attacks again and again and again, and a fictitious crying foul pointing the finger at Pakistan, when in reality, the problem is homegrown. India needs to wake up and recognize that.
KC Singh, you've got to look within.
This is a very surprising line of argument. The 9-10 people who attacked Mumbai came by boat from Karachi.
This is actually, sir,
the whole plot was hatched in Pakistan.
This is an
the
alleged,
person arrested, let me finish, Professor. The person who was apprehended while committing the offense is a Pakistani. It took Pakistan 2 months to acknowledge that he was a Pakistani. There are 9 bodies lying in a morgue in Bombay, which Pakistan is refusing to take back, and they have themselves challaned and arrested 7 individuals in Pakistan who belong to the chain of command Lashkar-e-Taiba, which has been completely supported by the military, the intelligence wing of the Pakistani military. So I'm really surprised at the position you're taking, because there's no local support available.
Okay, let's bring in Professor Chak. What do you say to that?
You see, there are a lot of allegations, but nothing has been proved as of yet. 7 people have been taken to court in Pakistan. They are right now, all of them have said that they're not guilty of the offenses and the charges that have been labeled against them. The one person that Pakistan has officially accepted does have Pakistani citizenship is a Mr. Kasab, who several years prior was relocated to Nepal, and since that time has not gone back to Pakistan. So, but aside from that, I think there's a deeper concern here, a deeper concern, and frankly speaking, the Indian people deserve better than this very tiring, this very kind of puny and very needy narrative that the Indian intelligentsia is articulating.
Okay, Professor Chak, let's get away from, I'm going to jump in there because we want to get away from culpability, and I'd like to bring in Professor Gary Birch, if we may. As we saw in our report there from Ram, and the feeling on the street that there has been no real change in security since Mumbai, it could happen again with just as devastating consequences. What do you think?
Well, it certainly could. I mean, we're all vulnerable in the 21st century. Terrorism is there. It's very divisive in our societies, coming to grips with it. It seems to me more needs to be done in India, more needs to be done worldwide. But what is really required is thoughtful leadership in dealing with the roots of terrorism, coming to grips with issues within our societies, between our societies, and it's going to continue to be a challenge in the decades ahead. India is trying to come to grips with this. It's not easy. It hasn't been easy for the United States post 9/11. We've done some things reasonably well. We've done other things very poorly. We just have to be understanding and patient as we deal with these inevitable terrorist threats that are going to come to our society. There will be more in India, there will be more in the United States, in other countries in the world. But what we should do is keep the focus on why terrorism happens, what can be done to minimize the threats that will be coming from within and from outside our shores.
OK, well, I'll tell you what, when it comes to security, as we've just been hearing in this region, you mentioned India in one breath and Pakistan in the next. Ties between the two countries are just sensitive, to say the least. They've fought 3 wars since independence from Britain in 1947, and in this week's visit to the United States, the Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh said he wants Pakistan to be held accountable for the Mumbai terror attacks.
Pakistan, in our view, should be pressurized by the world community to do much more to bring to book all those people who are responsible for this horrible crime. After all, there is now impeccable evidence that the conspiracy was planned in Mumbai, in Pakistan.
Well, India considers the United States an important partner in dealing with Pakistan. In fact, in recent years, both countries have forged closer defence and economic ties. And last year, they signed a landmark nuclear deal. It gives India access to US civilian nuclear technology and fuel, and that's in return for inspections of its civilian nuclear facilities. On the other hand, the US considers Pakistan to be an integral partner in fighting terrorism. Last month, the US President Barack Obama signed a $7.5 billion aid package for Pakistan to fight the insurgency there. Let's speak to Dr. Gary Birch again about that. You know, that's how it stands, and you've written a book about the need or otherwise of engaging with the world's largest democracy. Do you think anything has actually changed in the way the United States approaches both countries, Pakistan and India, since Mumbai?
I think the United States recognizes more than ever that it has to be engaged with both India and Pakistan. It has to play a responsible role in trying to promote the kind of cooperation, sometimes compromise, that will be required between these two very important countries. I think the Obama administration is trying to do everything possible, and I applaud them on their efforts so far. It's not easy. Not everything has been well received, but they recognize the critical stakes that are going to be played out and hopefully dealt with in South Asia in the coming years. So I think having the Prime Minister here in Washington for these private talks, I'm sure things that were said and I hope agreed upon that will help create a climate. I don't think either Pakistan or India should feel that the United States is not going to be a good partner here. I'm confident that given the interests of the United States, the responsibilities and the nature of this administration, that they will continue to be an honest broker and do everything possible, because it's so important to the United States, it's so important to the region, and to global security. I also think there are important roles for other countries in the region to play. The United States obviously can't do this alone, but it all plays a leading role, of course.
Professor Chak, I can see you want to jump in there.
Actually, I completely agree with the professor. It's a very articulate, well-spoken narrative he's presented to us, that the U.S. needs to engage both Pakistan and India. It needs to encourage both of them to stop the blame game, and particularly the onus is on India to really recognize the own deep grievances within its society, not the least of which are the 100,000 farmer suicides, the Naxalist insurgency, the deaths in ongoing and repression of Kashmir. These things are creating a very unstable India that is in many ways in contradiction to this incredible India image that the world is being force-fed to accept. The reality is very different. We're going to have to wake up, we're going to have to recognize these deep internal problems, and then hope to achieve some kind of peace and harmony within the region.
It's fair to say, Casey Singh, isn't it, that these grievances between Pakistan and India are just simply playing into the hands of those who perpetrated the Mumbai attacks?
Mr. Clark, I can only say it's comical. The presentation made by the professor in Qatar seems to indicate either he's been given a very jaundiced version or he's never been to India. He just doesn't understand what India is, where we are and where we are headed. It's a rising power in Asia. We will contain the Naxalite violence. We've done it in the past.
You know, Nick,
India has the mechanism for dealing with that. We have a rule of law. We have courts. We know how to deal with it. But we certainly are not going to conduct a dialogue with a gun of terrorism held to a head. And that is what the Prime Minister has done. He is saying that time and again, the dialogue process where we are willing to discuss with Pakistan all issues, including Kashmir, cannot be continued if there is terrorism which is seen as supported by the state in Pakistan hitting us every now and then.
Nick,
and the terrorism, then the dialogue process gets interrupted.
This discourse is tiring. People are sick of it. I'm sure the Indian people, they deserve better than what Mr. Singh is offering them. It's time to wake up and recognize
Professor,
the
you need to visit India. You have a very jaundiced view. You have no understanding of where the situation is in India.
You need to recognize, Mr. Singh, you need to recognize the poverty in your society. You need to recognize that 400 million people in your country live on less than $1 a day. You need to recognize that $2 US.
Okay, Professor Chak, let Casey Singh come back to that.
I mean, this is a very jaundiced, through a very narrow aperture he's approaching India. India is, of course, a continent. India is not just a small country. There are large parts of India which are moving very rapidly, and these kinds of disparities would be there in every country, including in the US, including in the Gulf, the country that he's living in. I'm sure there's a hell of a lot of laborers, expat community there, which is not getting the benefits in any of the Gulf countries.
More than a disparity.
Why doesn't the see
when 2/3 of your population live on less than $2 a day? This is more than a disparity.
Professor, they are moving up. And it is a whole continent which is moving forward.
We wish you all the best,
Mr. Singh. Let's not go into the demographics of all of this. I'd like to bring in Professor Birch. There's bound to be a different approach as far as the US is concerned between their approach to Pakistan and India. On the one hand, you have an emerging economic powerhouse, don't you? And on the other hand, that needs to be courted. And on the other hand, you have a front line in this battle against the fighters that the US perceives to be enemies.
Well, that's true. I mean, these are very different countries. They share a common border, but they have rather different challenges. My own impression is that India is doing very well, given the kinds of challenges that they've had in the past. And they have an economic model. They have leadership now that is moving India forward. And I think we can be quite optimistic about the future of a prosperous democratic state in India. Of course, there are many people to pull up. Inequalities there are great. But I think there's the potential for a stable democracy that can deal with these issues. Pakistan is more troubling. We all know the kinds of internal problems that it has. And it needs the support of the United States. It needs the support of India and other countries in the region and the world to deal with these challenges. And that's the opportunity that we have at this historic point in the 21st century. Imagine an Asia, a South Asia, based upon a commitment to peace and prosperity. There's so much that can be accomplished by these countries working together. We should come up with an agreement on Kashmir. It's been there too long. It can be solved, at least addressed in a way that will allow these people who do deserve more throughout South Asia and throughout the broader region. And I believe that bold leadership coming out of Delhi, coming out of Islamabad, coming out of Washington, here at my home, and in other places, countries like China and Russia and Europe can look at this region of the world, look at the economic dynamism and what could be achieved if political stability and better relations were brought among these people.
Okay, let's put those points
to Casey. The center that I direct is called Trade and Security. Okay. I think we need both in the world today, and they can be achieved.
Forgive me for jumping in. I just want to put those points to Casey Singh. A lot of sense being taught there in Washington.
I absolutely agree with Professor Birch. That is exactly the approach that India has adopted. I've seen it up close when I was in service. In fact, I was part of the inter-terror mechanism which was set in after the 2006 attacks in Mumbai, the train bombings. Because the idea for the mechanism was that let's insulate the dialogue process from terrorism. And that is precisely what was done. But then Pakistan went into its own spin. President Musharraf lost control over the office, and Pakistan had elections. Benazir Bhutto was shot. And then after that, before serious dialogue could be resumed, and we had elections in India, you had this attack in Mumbai. And now the question in India is, in a democracy, how does the government go on engaging a neighboring country when the finger is pointed directly there? And this time the evidence has not just come from India, it's come from FBI. Because there was GPS systems, there was voice over
That's actually
internet
inaccurate.
telephony.
That's actually
okay,
inaccurate.
I really don't want to get into the culpabilities. I say, Professor Chak, let me put this to you. In the event of another attack, isn't there a chance that the already very strained, as we're experiencing right now, relations between India and Pakistan could be stretched to breaking point, and who knows what might happen at that point?
Absolutely, Nick, you're absolutely right. And my primary concern is when I look at the region is for the people in this region that deserve much better than the leadership that is what the leadership is providing for them, including people like Mr. Singh that are articulating a narrative full of hate, that is always finger pointing, that is not addressing the root causes of poverty,
I've not had any hate expressed. I'm surprised at this.
Or
I'm sorry, you must take this back.
Their own
Nick, you'll have to have him take this back.
Casey Singh, we'll come to you. We'll come to you in 30 seconds.
You cannot.
We hope that the people can have a leadership that will address the real problems in their society, education, healthcare, address these issues rather than pointing the blame at neighbors. Let's look at ourselves.
Okay, listen, we've said that before. So Casey Singh, what do you say back to that?
It's an extremely jaundiced view which is coming from the professor in Doha. I'm surprised at the perspective he's developing.
We've heard that statement again before already, so let's just leave that. Let's speak to Professor Gary Birch. Professor Birch, how do you make sense of this? So you can see the enmities that are ongoing between India and Pakistan. Very, very difficult to resolve. It's easy, with respect, to say what you have said, but how do you make the breakthrough?
Well, I think you look to bold leadership. I think that President Obama in the United States has demonstrated the kind of global vision that will promote the values that we all hold dear. I also think that Prime Minister Singh is a man of impeccable credentials, and that he will provide the kind of leadership that will serve India, the region, and the world well. And I think that that kind of leadership also can exist in Pakistan. And I agree with the professor that India, the people of India and Pakistan deserve better. We all deserve better. But what we haven't come to grips with is the kind of vision that will promote cooperation and sometimes compromise and understanding that will allow us to realize the true potential that exists in that region and that exists in this world. The Cold War was very costly to the United States and Russia. We hope we're moving beyond that. We see what's being done in China when it focuses on development. We see what economic opportunities there are when you put people to work. And that's what has to take place in South Asia. And there can be a better world there that will support the interests and the needs of these people that deserve the very best.
All right, there you go. There's an optimistic point to finish on. There can be a better world. Professor Gary Birch, Professor Farhan Chak, and Casey Singh, thanks very much indeed for joining us here. And thank you for watching this edition of Inside Story. Don't forget, we're always eager to hear your thoughts. Just email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. From me, Nick Clark, it's goodbye.